Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today for C3 Converse presented by Nielsen. My name is Shannon Sarikaku and I'm the guest services coordinator of this year's 36th edition of the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival presented by Visual Communications. We'd like to thank everyone for making this festival possible, especially the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal, California Arts Council, SAG-AFTRA Producers Industry Advancement and Cooperative Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and HBO and Warner Media. Now for our next artist discussion, folks, please welcome Isil Barlasa.
Mahalo, Shannon. Hi, I'm Isil. I'm one of the programmers here at the festival. I am coming to you all the way live from Long Beach, California. I'd like to acknowledge the Tongva and Quiche nations who are the original stewards of this land before we all got here. So like Shannon said, we are in for an inspirational conversation with the shorts program Connections. The directors here have put together a selection, or their films have been strung together that kind of center around connection and how connections can bring surprising lessons into one's life. You never know who might bring that lesson to you. But before we get into that conversation, I do want to let you know, if you want to follow along for the closed captions, we are dropping a link in the chat now. If you click on that link, it'll bring you to another window that should pop up with the transcript for this audio conversation. And again, special thanks to everyone that has helped make this festival possible, to our sponsors, and especially our community partner organizations for their valuable work and for continuing to support visual communications. On that note, let's get started with the conversation. I'd like to invite all of our artists to turn on your cameras so that we could have a little bit of a gallery view. I'm just gonna pass the mic and I'll invite each artist to introduce themselves with their name, the name of their film, and let us know where you're zooming in from. Let's start with Shilpi.
Hi, my name is Shilpi Roy. I am the director and writer of Stalled, and I am coming to you from Silver Lake, Los Angeles, California.
Thanks. Passing the mic to Tavri.
Cecile. I'm Tavri Crouch, writer-director of Bitter Melons. I am zooming in from Chicago, Illinois.
From Chicago. Passing the mic to Koji.
Hi, my name is Koji. My film's title is called Makalis, and I am zooming from Japan.
All the different time zones in the chat today. Thank you guys for taking the time to hang out with us. And just a special reminder for the audience, if you haven't seen these films yet or want to encourage folks to see the films, you can check it out on our watch site. They'll be available until the 31st. So now let's get into the conversations. I want to explore sort of how you approach these films and why you wanted to tell these stories. I'll begin first with Koji. If you can, just tell the audience a little bit about the film and what the inspiration is behind the film.
Okay. Well, my film, Makalis, is about a tragic story of a dying daughter who suffers from the guilt of leaving her mother behind. And the story is told not from the daughter's perspective, but it's actually told from the perspective of a reaper. And it mainly focuses on the character arc of the reaper as she slowly understands human suffering and love. And I guess like the first time I came up with this story was I actually came up with the ending first. So like I don't really want to like talk about the ending because it's going to spoil it, but I came up with the ending first. It just suddenly popped up in my head when I was working on one commercial that I didn't like working on because like my mind was not really focused on the commercial, but I was thinking about like some cool story ideas. Then my co-writer Kenta was there on the same set. So I just went up to him and talked to him. Hey, Kenta, what do you think of this idea? And I told him the ending of the story. And he just said, dude, that's like the bleakest story I've ever heard. But it might be very interesting. So that's how I came up with this idea. And then it actually deals with the philosophy of death, but mainly kind of from the perspective of Japanese, from like a Japanese perspective, because like Japan is kind of famous for extremely high suicide rate, and also like we have our own view on death. You know, like I think a lot of people are familiar with the samurai suicide, seppuku or harakiri. You know, like a lot of still like today, many Japanese people see death as some kind of like solution for suffering, and that's like some people still see it as like the way, like the best way to end your life in an honorable way. You know, even though like I don't personally agree with it, but I do understand like how some people see death in that way in Japan. And then I actually lived in LA for 7 years, and then I kind of like during that 7 years, I kind of started seeing Japan from a foreigner's perspective, you know, because I was away from my own country for so long. Then I kind of realized that the view on death in Japan, you know, was normal to me when I was, you know, growing up here, but kind of realized that it's a little extreme and very kind of strange, and but also like understandable. So like that's why I wanted to tell the story from a third person, like outsider's perspective. So yeah, that's how this film kind of came to life.
When I first read the synopsis, you know, kind of glanced through like which films I'm gonna watch next. I didn't anticipate how like warm or heartfelt the film would have been. I kind of expected something a little bit more
like a
grim reapery. Yeah. So I was really taken aback by how much empathy I felt for the Grim Reaper throughout the film, and that's a credit to your direction and to the writing. But I want to get a little bit into your visual storytelling in a bit, but I do want to segue to Tavri. So in Makalis, the story centers are with the mother and child, and that's essentially the beginning of your story as well. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your film and why you wanted to tell the story?
Sure. Like Asil mentioned, the film opens up with a mother and daughter relationship, and you know, art imitates life in many ways, and I feel like the woman in my life, certainly my mother, they've been the rock. They've been sort of the steady, consistent theme throughout my life. And I wanted her to sort of be the beginning of the book end to the film, because there is sort of a book ending to the film. So she's the beginning of it, the mother, and there is instant conflict and drama. And that's that scene with the daughter and mother sort of get you going, get you wondering, where is the story going? Because there's so much pent up anger and resentment and bitterness that the daughter feels, and specifically towards, not so much towards mom, but towards dad. And that's what we're learning, is this is a relational story, a family story, focusing on parents and children, mother and daughter, father and daughter. So, you know, those were the people that we first learn from and model ourselves and our relationships from in our lives, is from our parents. So those are her first and foremost her teachers, and that's where she main character sort of has to grow from and learn to navigate and to develop a sense of understanding and compassion. And that's a part of like becoming an adult, is not holding grudges against our parents, because they're human and they mess up too, you know, and sort of that's part of her journey is understanding, getting some perspective on her parents and coming to a place of compassion and forgiveness. Yeah, so connections to our parents, connections between parents and children. That is definitely very similar to Koji, is it's a beautiful relationship and a very wrought relationship because there are so many emotions tied to that specific relationship between mother and daughter, which is different from father and daughter, right? It's still very emotionally wrought. There's a lot of layers of stuff going on.
There's those layers, you feel it. I mean, first of all, I was immediately drawn in by this sort of play on dream versus reality kind of beginning there. But that scene that kind of plays out on the porch between the mother and daughter, I felt like I was a neighbor, kind of like spying on the drama next door. It felt so real. And we were talking about it earlier in the green room. The way it goes between mother tongue and English in Khmer, it's Khmer in English. Did you write it intentionally? Like, this is going to be Khmer, this is going to be English? Or did that come like forth through your mom character? Or did you work with your actors on that?
Yes to both. So I don't speak Khmer, and yes, perfect. Khmer is the Cambodian language. I don't speak it fluently. I lost the ability to speak it as a child. It just wasn't reinforced. My parents never made it a priority to enforce it in the home. So what eventually happens, as a native speaker of a language, you lose it over time. So that is my experience. I speak to my mother in English and she replies back in Khmer, and I actually prefer it because when she tries to speak Khmer, it's much more of a challenge to understand her, right? Like, just speak Khmer. I understand you completely. I understand you better if you spoke in Khmer than English. So I knew that much. Like, okay, she is going to respond mostly in English back to mom, who's mostly speaking Khmer. I knew that much. But in the shaping of the story and the working of it through the course of the writing with my co-writer, my husband. My husband's there. He's helping me, just sort of throwing ideas back and forth. And even in the process on set in production, the lead, sorry, not the lead, but the actor playing mom, she helped in the translation for the subtitling, and she also suggested, mom. So when she is speaking English, that is directly from our actor who plays Chenda. She's suggesting, I think she's going to speak some English because she's somewhat, she's become acclimated. She's become Americanized to a certain extent. I think she's gonna throw some English back in response to her daughter. So that was our actress Channy. Thanks, Channy. So we wrote that in. We built that in. And another suggestion I want to mention, my co-writer is also my husband. He also wore a lot of, we're indie filmmakers. He wore a lot of hats on set. He was the AD. He was the first AD. He was the production manager. I mean, poor guy. Like, he was running around like crazy. But he's also very opinionated and was next to me and said, hey, Pisay Pao, our lead actress, playing the protagonist, she should respond in Khmer. Because initially I had written her to respond completely all in English. And my husband said, no, she's got to respond in Khmer, so that people who aren't Khmer will have some sort of context that when she is responding in Khmer, that there's some sort of connection between her Khmerness, her Khmer identity, and the fact that she can speak some Khmer. Maybe not as fluently, but she can. So yeah, a little bit of both.
Pisay killed it in your performance in the most positive way to use that horrible term. But I want to go back to your casting in a bit. But to continue the thought of writing, Shilpi's, the strength is the dialogue and the banter that Shalini has with everyone in her world, from from home, trying to like get, cheered up to, go out and get booed up with this stranger. Can you tell us a little bit about the film and I guess the writing process for it? Because there's so much great conversation in this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the film is basically about an Indian American woman who goes on a blind date that is going very badly. And in the process, she gets entangled in a stranger's failed wedding proposal that's happening at the same restaurant. And so the woman who has just been proposed to and Shalini, who's on this bad date, they find themselves both in the bathroom. And they end up kind of commiserating about their issues with love and trust. And they kind of have different issues, but they're both in this kind of bad space. And it's about strangers connecting, right? Which often, sometimes it's easier to actually connect with the stranger than it is a family member, right? Like that's why therapy works, I think. And so, but the writing process was actually quite interesting because I wrote the film 10 years before I shot it. And I actually wrote it to be my thesis film when I was at USC Film School. And I just remember that we had this like class where we kind of rewrite the film before we then go and shoot it. And my professor, who kind of was running the class, just hated the film. Like she did not like my character. She didn't like what they were doing or why they were doing it. And I mean, to be fair, my first draft was horrible. But I kept rewriting it to please her. And by the end, I just hated the film too, And so I put it aside and I literally didn't look at it for 10 years. And it was 10 years later, I was applying to a different program where I needed a short film script. And I was like, well, let me see, maybe I can salvage this. And I read it again and I actually really liked it. And I found it very relevant to my life 10 years later, where I was now married, whereas when I'd written it, I was completely single, right? Like I'd gone through a whole arc in my life and the film still felt very relevant. And so that's what I made it. And so that banter really comes out of my having lived 10 years between like when I first wrote it and when I did some rewriting on the back end, but not like a ton. But that's kind of, it's about like the fact that sometimes you can't admit things to yourself, but it is sometimes easier to admit them to a stranger, and that's kind of what both Shalini and Stacy are kind of going through, in the film.
The characters are so rich, and it's what peaks in the dialogue a little bit. Green dress lady, Stacy, like, when she's kind of like spewing her feelings, but there's a lot of her backstory that comes up, right? And she's processing. And it was just fascinating for me to be like, wow, like, this writer's like really giving it all. And it's effective to me as an audience member. And it's also making me feel awkward. Like I feel like Shalini in the other stall, like this is too much. This blonde girl's giving me too much. But a lot of it is also, the casting. They were so on top of each other. Tell us a little bit about the cast and how you found them.
Yeah, it was my first time using a casting director ever. We were looking like Stacy, I knew was going to be essentially a blonde white girl. I just wanted like a very kind of stereotypical girl you could just write off. And obviously there are like hundreds in Los Angeles. But narrowing them down, it was difficult because it's still a short film. Nobody's getting very much money, if any. And so I was having trouble finding the right Stacy. And I had actually sold a pilot a couple of years ago that that went into production, and we had been casting. And in that casting process, I actually remembered Kimberly Crossman, who plays Stacy. She had come through and she had been amazing, and whatever, we hadn't cast her. And then my casting director brought her up and was like, what about Kimberly Crossman? I was like, oh my God, yes. I've actually seen her before. She's amazing. She would be perfect. She's actually from New Zealand. I don't know if you guys know that. So she's got a New Zealand accent, but in the film, she's American. And then for Shalini, a much smaller pool of actors, but there's still quite a few. And Kieran just kind of came in and she really understood the nuance of the role, how like this woman like was very kind of deeply scarred by her past, right? That's kind of why she was reacting in this current situation the way that she was. And yet, you have to still be humorous. It's still a comedy. It's essentially a rom-com. And so she had a really great way of being able to play both of those things. So that's why we ended up going with her.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of story and a lot of exposition in essentially a freaking bathroom. And I was so impressed with how much where my emotions went from awkward, I don't want to be here. And then that breath of chuckle when the two girls kind of encounter them. It was so perfect. It's a perfect sort of roller coaster of emotion. I'm going to move to Koji, totally different emotion in your film. First of all, your mom, the mom, I guess in contrast to Shilpi's, where a lot of the story is sort of elevated through the dialogue and banter. A lot of your story is in sort of this reserved, constrained performance from your leads, and also the visual storytelling, which I want to get into. But tell us a little bit about the mom in particular, because her tears, Koji, too much.
Yeah.
I still feel it in my throat when I watch it. How did you find them?
Well, it was just a regular audition. First of all, we don't have casting networks here. So we don't have LA casting or anything like that. So pretty much, but we do have something similar called Cinema Planners. That's pretty much a Japanese LA casting site. But pretty much the system is not built in a way you can actually easily pick your favorite actors or anything, but they just let you post all the audition information and everything. So pretty much you have to deal with all the emails from all the actors. So pretty much I have to deal with 200 emails every day and go through literally every portfolio from every actor. Then originally I had this, this actress's name who played the mother is Kotomi. I think she's watching right now. So if you can say hi to Kotomi.
I'm my eyeballs are welling up right now just thinking.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Actually, first I saw her picture and I thought she was she had the right look, first of all. Then we actually did all the video auditions, instead of doing regular in-person auditions, because there were too many actors I had to see and I didn't have money to hire casting directors. So I did all the casting myself. So yeah, so pretty much I talked with her over emails, and then at one point it was just either her or the other actress, and those two were, first of all, their skill-wise, they were pretty much on the same level. They're both really, really good, but and they had the right look, but they both had different personalities, and the other actress had more a stronger mind, I would say. She was a stronger mother, more independent mother. Then Kotomi was more she had this very sensitive personality. She's pretty much that's pretty much her being herself, pretty much, basically. She's a very sensitive person and very kind and very sweet woman. And then when I first met her in person, I let her read her backstory as an audition. That was the final audition with her, instead of having her act any of the scene. Actually, we didn't rehearse any of the scenes because I didn't want them to sound like they're so used to their dialogues. So I just told her can you just read your backstory? Because I gave her about 5 pages long backstory, and I let her read it. And at one point in the middle of the reading, I told her to stop, and I just told her to, so the backstory is talking about how she grew up and how she had this woman. She actually didn't have a mother, in her backstory, but she did have a woman who was taking care of her in the backstory. And I told her to changed this woman's name to her own mother, Kotomi's own mother, then can you read the backstory again? Then she started reading it, and suddenly she couldn't stop crying when she was just reading the backstory. Then I, in a way, I was like, that's the moment that I thought she is this mother's character, you know, because like she's so emotional and so sensitive, and she has like, and she also has like so much love in her personality. So that's why I really liked her. Then, yeah, so I decided to cast her. And then the interesting thing about, especially like you mentioned about how much she's crying, especially there's like one scene when she's crying on the couch. Like there's like no dialogue, and even there's not even a single cut there. It's just like a long take of her crying, but it's like so heartbreaking, right? And that looks so strong because she's not really acting. That's like in the original script, she's not supposed to cry that much. She's supposed to hold back her tears, you know, because I did some like, you know, directing technique there so that she could react better. And she knew that she was trying to follow the script and trying to hold back her tears as much as she could. That's why it looks so heartbreaking and so sad, you know. Then that's not acting. She's actually crying. Yeah.
That's exactly the scene I'm thinking of, and I feel it in my throat just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But in that scene and also throughout the film, what I see is sort of you allow the audience to sort of take in the scene, and I almost bloom in the emotion, just sort of like taking in everything. And when I say taking it in, there's almost like a fine art element in the picture I saw on screen, like from the color, the way the lighting falls on your talent. Can you talk a little bit about your approach for the visual storytelling?
Yeah, the DP for this film is Nick Matthews. He actually lives in LA. He's the only white guy on set. Yeah, then he's actually American, so I actually had him fly to Japan to film this movie with me. And you know, I've known him for almost like 4 years now, but it was his like first time to shoot in Japan and even work with me. Then the reason why I wanted to have him as a DP was like I needed this outsider's perspective for this story, because the story is told from a Reaper who's not a human. It's about Reaper seeing the story of human beings. So that's why I wanted his eyes that are not used to seeing Japan, you know. So like that's why many of the scenes, everything was shot in Japan, but a lot of people told me that it does not look like Japan. Even Japanese people said, "Did you really shoot this in Japan?" You know. So like I wanted to have that outsider perspective. Also, me and Nick talked a lot about using shadows, you know, and because it's if you just write down the story, you know, in words, it's actually a horror movie, but it's more like a horror movie told as a human drama. So I thought I would need to show this in a visual that's kind of closer to horror movie. And also like, as you see this, the arc of the story, you know, there's definitely a change in the character arc of the Reaper. I wanted to just express that with colors pretty much. And also like, yeah, and also because like I personally, it's just like my personal belief on visual storytelling is that like I don't really like showing everything clearly, you know, because like when your face is covered in shadow, like makes you want to look more. It makes you curious because you cannot see well, you know. So just like the first Alien movie, you know, you don't see Alien until the very end. You only hear the sound, you feel the presence, and that kind of feeling, you know, it makes you more curious. So that's what I wanted to do. So that's why, like, in many of the scenes, you can't see their faces, you know. Yeah, there's even a shot. Yeah, there's even a shot of the daughter whose face is covered in shadow, like completely covered in shadow, you know, after in the bedroom scene, you know, she's just sitting there, but you only see the silhouette of the daughter, and that makes it, I don't know, feel more powerful, especially with this kind of like really dark drama. So that's why, I told Nick, like, don't overlight it. We don't have to see what we don't have to see, and try to stick to like practical lights and natural light as much as possible. And so we actually used lots of practical lights and natural lights, and because we didn't have that much budget for lighting, so like many of the scenes are shot with practical lights and like with small lights, affordable lights and stuff. So that's how, we did it.
It's very effective, and it totally did warm up that horror story for a human drama. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to move to Taveri, kind of continuing the thought of like how the scene like plays into your storytelling. What I took from your film is I saw the sort of play of how the kitchen is like the heart of a home. Your lead is, the film begins in the kitchen. First, the heart of her actual home, right? And it's not that warm, you feel like in your lead's life. And then you move to her place of work, her professional life in the kitchen, and that's where she really comes to life, and she brings in her cultural legacy in that. I was really like curious of, like, I wanted to know if you have experience in the kitchen, because there's a beautiful vignette in the film where you see her kind of prepare the family meal, and then it kind of goes into the sort of the tasting menu, and the shots and the sort of from the kitchen to the table. Can you talk a little bit about the production of that?
Sure. So the kitchen is a sort of running theme and a through line that connects most of the characters. Most of the scenes, a good majority of the scenes are happening in a kitchen. The act of cooking, the act of serving food, the act of eating food, which is all human, which is all primal. We all need to eat, but also a sense of, again, bringing together, right? Food is the connector here. And I don't come from, like, I love to cook. I'm not trained professionally to cook. I did work, I had stints in restaurants throughout college and through in between jobs when I was sort of figuring out what to do with my life. That was always like the easy place to go to, the easy fallback. Like I knew that I could easily get a job serving tables, bussing tables. I'm actually terrible at it. But I made my first restaurant job was what really inspired this film and sort of drew from that experience. I was 19, 20 years old. This was my first job. It was in a tiny bistro in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I made some really great friendships working in this restaurant. And, as like artists and filmmakers, we're observing all the time. And they're very vivid memories of being in that setting and being among the characters. Like people who work in restaurants are characters within themselves. So I wanted to draw a bit from that. And the restaurant that we used is an actual working restaurant. The chef who plays chef is an actual chef. That is his restaurant. Most of the employees who weren't actors, professional actors, work in that restaurant. So again, thinking like, how do we make this efficient? How do we make this work on a low budget? Let's bring in the actual staff of the restaurant. Let's bring in and I just thought it'd be fun to also include the chef who was really nervous, but I thought he did a great job. I mean, he really pulled off his performance, and so I'm proud of him. And the food, those were his creations. He sees himself as, he's very much an artist. Not just sees himself as an artist, he's very much an artist when it comes to food and the flavors are very Thai, Southeast Asian flavors, but also very beautifully crafted. And so what you see being cooked especially like that vignette of the putting together the bitter melon soup. That's his creation. That, you know, so I wanted to incorporate that collaboration with him, and also just relying on him. He's the food expert. He's the chef. Like, chef, help me make this. How do you see this? And he has a love for bitter melons. You know, coincidentally, it just really worked out great having him as a collaborator, a partner, a friend during those days and during prep. Just, he's passionate about food. And so yeah, a lot of it's just like actual existing things, the actual restaurant, the actual people that work and live in that space. And Pisay, you know, she's worked in restaurants. She knows her way, Pisay Pao, she knows her way through in a kitchen. Same with her co-actor, who plays Brett. He also works in a restaurant, and you know, and that's sort of, you know, that becomes the typical story is like working actor also works in restaurants, right? And so they know their way around the kitchen, they know the lingo, so that helped. Just so relying on Pisay and her co-star to sort of navigate the kitchen themselves, yeah, just really wanting to also support the local, you know, showcase Chicago as much as possible. The restaurant itself is a very like well-known Chicago restaurant, Arun's Thai. And so just giving attention to that. And yeah, just, it really worked out. I was just really glad that we ended up where we ended up with that location.
Yeah, Pisay is quite natural in the kitchen. And so when I was watching it, like, you know, how much of that is, I didn't know if Pisay was familiar in the kitchen, or is this her family upbringing? Like, you know, is that coming through in her arm as she's beating the egg, you know, or did she have to be directed as such? But it almost felt like a sort of homage to sort of kitchen life, because I know Chicago is a quite proud culinary city. So that was quite effective in viewing the film. Thank you for that. Moving to Stalled, like Pisay's using her sort of experience in the kitchen, you know, to kind of bring to her character. We talked a little bit in the green room of this. I'm curious if you mentioned a little bit earlier that a little bit of real life came through in the storytelling of Stalled. And I told you this, and I'll say here for anyone that's in the room, if my sister saw this film, she would straight up say, "Oh, you're fucking like Shalini. You don't want to like put yourself out there." So I want to know, has anyone in your family seen the film, and you know, and what their commentary is about Shalini's sort of position in the film? Like, let's say in my family's background and in my cultural background, there is like that importance of getting married by a certain time or having that type of value. I'm curious how your film may have played out in your family and their sort of audience reaction.
Well, that's interesting to think about. I mean, certainly the themes of the film of Shalini, like feeling like she, you know, she has to find love, but / get married. And it's a lot of it's like the family pressure versus herself. And she doesn't quite know which one is which, right? Like, is it the family or is it her? Because the family's definitely present. And she's trying to figure out, is she also present? Like, does she want these things too? Or is she just doing it because of family pressure? Ironically, in terms of my family's response to the movie, I don't recall them ever commenting on it. So I don't have a sister, and I have an older brother. It's a completely different relationship from Shalini and her sister in this movie. And I think I often like to write sisters because I guess I sometimes wish that I had a close relationship with a sister, because my brother and I, we have a good relationship, but it is nothing like two sisters who are close to each other, right? And I know my parents were proud of, you know, me making the film, but my husband is a white guy. So really, like, most of the movie is about me, I would say, and my personal journey in like figuring out how much of what I want is because I want it, and how much of what I want is what my parents wanted for me. And so to that end, it kind of doesn't matter what my family thinks because yeah, I'm just kind of trying to separate myself from them in this one way so that I can, you know, be happy with the decisions I make going forward.
That, first of all, you go girl. And that brings me to my next question, just to continue the conversation that was started earlier in the green room. What I like about each of the films is they're quite accessible in terms of like heart, awkward relationship vibes, crying over, you know, the passing of a child, being mad and / missing a father. But you could feel your cultural backgrounds come through a little bit. However, it doesn't necessarily drive the stories of your characters. I am curious as artists, like how do you draw your cultural background or family legacy, if at all? How do you bring it into your work professionally? We'll stay with Shilpi, and then I'll pass the mic.
Yeah, I mean, you know, especially with this push we have right now for diverse voices and diverse stories, I personally love to, like when I'm watching TV or film, learn about other cultures and the kind of issues and tensions emotionally and, you know, in the physical world that they have. And so I always very consciously try to bring my own background into my work as much as I can, whether it's, you know, growing up, I grew up in North Carolina. I was an Indian, you know, Indian American girl. And I went to a school of mostly white people. So like, I could see how they saw me. And it was different from the way I saw myself and my family. And so I kind of retain that, I try to retain that outsider's perspective on my life. And then kind of, I'm like, okay, well, I know this is how people think of me or, you know, my population, what do I want to tell them that they don't know, right? What do I want to show them that they haven't seen before? And so whether or not, you know, the content I'm creating is specifically about being Indian or Indian American, I try to take that general perspective of, okay, what do people think that they know about this world? Okay, now what can I introduce to them that they wouldn't know about? And that's kind of how I approach everything.
I love it. That's where we all should be coming from, right? I'm gonna pass the mic to Tavri. I want to amplify that I'm from Long Beach, California. And I want to shout out the community that's thriving in Long Beach, the Khmer community, and how important storytelling of that, of your storytelling is. We're seeing a little bit more and more each year. How do you bring your sort of background into your storytelling?
Thank you for that shout out, Asil, because I'm from Long Beach. I grew up in Long Beach for a good portion of my adolescence and young adult life. And it's funny because in Long Beach, like Asian Americans, Cambodians, Filipinos, Vietnamese, they are the majority, right? They are the minority majority. But there's this disconnect when you turn on the TV or you go to the movies and you don't really see yourself reflected, right? So, you know, similar to Shilpi, I can't help but write from what I know, right? I can't like dissect this part of me that is Cambodian and how I've defined it for myself, because, you know, there's diversity within all of us, within all of our Asian ethnic groups. But you know, it also that's what makes us interesting. That's what makes us unique. And I'm proud of this part of me, my upbringing, my heritage, because it's something to show, it's something to share with the world. And I really see our films and I mean, when I make a film, it's like a gift, a contribution. Here is a thing that I'm showing you of myself that is also a story about my history and my people's history, right? And the obvious way to do that was through food, right? Food, and not just Cambodian food. Bitter melons is so ubiquitous within all of Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian cooking. So just sort of giving love, homage to that, and to something that's just not, I mean, most white people don't know what bitter melons is. And I love being able to say, well, white person, let me tell you, I will love to cook for you. You will, you know, it will be a love-hate relationship, but you will learn to love it.
To Shilpi, I mean, to echo Shilpi's point, it's you're taking your experiences to like, all right, you think you know something, you know, what can I do in my storytelling to tell you something new? Also, shout out to my mom. I didn't like bitter melon when I was a child, but now I love it. I don't know how that happened. Let's move to Koji, to kind of like reach back to your point of your cinematographer using an outsider's point of view to kind of, I guess, take a different perspective of a tale that's somewhat lensed from Japanese culture. Like, how do you use your legacy for your storytelling and your decisions as a director?
Yeah. Well, before I start talking about it, I actually went to school in Long Beach, Cal
Whoop,
Long
whoop.
Beach. Yeah, go Long Beach, right? But anyways, I think I'm actually my I think my great grandfather was a samurai, so like I do have like that kind of like samurai DNA in me. So like I think like a lot of things about the philosophy of death in Japan is like based on the philosophy of the way of the samurai, you know. So like I guess like that actually had some kind of effect on my storytelling, even though like I'm not like intentionally doing it. And also I guess like I think in Japanese culture in general, mother and daughter relationship is a lot stronger than like mother and son relationship, you know, for some reason. I don't know why, but like especially I have a sister, and she and my mother hang out like all the time. Like they're like best friends, you know, they're hanging out all the time, going to shopping all the time and kind of stuff. Like, and I don't really like hang out with her that way, you know, like friends or anything. I guess like that's why I wanted to have these characters, you know, instead of like, you know, mother and son, I wanted to have like mother and daughter, you know. So that felt kind of natural in like, especially when I'm telling a story about Japan, you know, that kind of felt natural for me. And also, I don't know. And also, when it comes to like what I really wanted to do, especially with this film, was that, you know, Japan is not really well known for diversity because like, you know, it's not a diverse country, you know. And yeah, I guess because of that, you know, Japan is kind of like in a way very conservative, and especially in like in many movies, women are not represented in a fair way, in my opinion. So most of the time, like many of the Japanese movies today kind of show them like either women are either like supporting characters or some kind of like, you know, romantic role for the male lead character, that kind of stuff, you know. And I think I'm sure like most of the women and especially actresses in Japan are kind of sick of it, and so that's why I wanted to have like women as human beings instead of as women, you know. And that really that kind of story doesn't happen so often in Japan. So that's why in a way like this film kind of, I do think this film kind of feels unique in that way of the representation of women, you know. I hope I did a good job doing that because I'm not a woman, so like, you know, maybe you ladies could judge. So
It was effective. I mean, in terms of connecting to my heart and my tears, effective. And I want to acknowledge that, like, you're sort of like your hope to, and acknowledge, or the way you position your inquiry. Thank you for that, because I think that sort of space of I don't quite know because that's not my experience, I think is so valuable when people approach storytelling, which is why I think it's so valuable for folks like these humans on the screen to tell your story so that someone else isn't, you know, trying to jump in on it. So someone cannot tell my single sexy free Filipino from Long Beach story. One day I'll make it as a documentary or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Francis is laughing at me right now. But we are approaching the hour. I do want to find out what's next for me, because I really want to see more storytelling from y'all, and especially this sort of, from the gut storytelling that's lensed by communities of color. Shilpi, let's start with you. What's next for the film, and what's next for you?
Yeah, I'm working on developing the film into like a TV property. And so it's been difficult because it works so well as a short, and I'm kind of having trouble figuring out how to expand it. How do I expand the world and the storytelling? Where do I start? Where do I start the story? But yeah, I'm working on that, and just trying to survive the pandemic.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what's my next big thing.
Well, I can't wait to see if there's more for Stacy and Shalini in the future, in another bathroom, perhaps. Thank you for sharing. Moving on to Tabri.
Trying to write every day, but I'm not the most disciplined person. So that is something in itself that I'm working on, is writing every day. So I can get this feature done, and I would love to make another short. I love playing with cross-cultural dialogue, cross-cultural cultures. So maybe incorporating some of that into the next one as well. And also trying to survive in this pandemic.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there, maybe reunite in the movie theaters soon. Koji, hopefully if you're able to travel to us, we'll be able to connect. What's next for you?
Oh, well, I just finished writing a feature film script, and well, I'm going to keep rewriting it. But right now, I think just like all of you, like we're in the middle of the pandemic here, so like we can't really do anything productive right now, And also, like I have another pilot script that I was actually trying to do, but it's about zombies. So I don't know if now is the right time to shoot it with people getting so close to each other and biting each other. So I'm hoping to actually shoot that soon, but I can't really say like when and what's gonna happen too soon. But like hopefully, like my feature script, I really like it, and it's like another very like dark story. I actually told the story already to the cast of my film, and and I think one of them is going to be the lead actor. I'm not going to tell you which one, but but yeah, they're all either said that's a great story or that's like the most depressing story I've ever heard. So we'll see. Yeah.
There seems to be a theme in how people are reacting to your ideas, Koji.
Yeah.
That wraps it up for our hour, guys. Thank you for taking the time for hanging out with me today. For everyone out in the audience, if you haven't yet seen this program, it is called Connections. It's a shorts program on our watch site. You can check it out now. It's available until the 31st of October. Please check it out and tell a friend. If you like this conversation and our festival programming, please consider donating to Visual Communications. We're in fact celebrating our 50th year, and your individual donor support helps keep the squad going all year long, and for the operations and the programming just like this. For more updates on the festival, we have about a week left. Please keep an eye on our website, festival.vcmedia.org, and please follow us on our social media accounts at VC Film Festival, and use the hashtag LAAPFF 2020. That's it for now. I'll see you guys at the next conversation. Coming up next, it's Cinema Musica with Joel Kison, so stick around for that. Thanks, guys. Bye.